Hello, welcome back to Planet 40k. We've got another bite-sized review for you today. This time we're going to be looking at one of the Cryptek models from the Necron Codex, and it's going to be the Psychomancer. So if you guys have yet to subscribe, please do so down below. Let's get on to today's bite-sized review. So it's £21 in the UK, $35 in the USA, and this model is going to be costing us 65 points. So it's of course a character model with a Cryptek keyword, and it can also fly, so bear that one in mind, although he is kind of lacking in the movement department. So speaking of his movement, he's only moving 5 inches with that fly keyword, so not very quick really, and the other stats aren't really worth mentioning, so let's get on to his abilities. So there's two main abilities that this model has. The first one is the main ability, which is the Harbinger of Despair ability, and it's done in your own morale phase. So what you do, you select an enemy unit within 12 inches and you roll 3 dice. If you beat their leadership value, then you get to select from one of the following points. So the first one is that unit that you selected, they cannot do actions, and if they're already doing an action, it immediately fails. So that's the first one. The second one is that unit's going to lose objectives secured. The third one is they're going to be halving their advance and charge rolls. And finally, the fourth one, they cannot fire Overwatch or set to defend. And then furthermore, they're not eligible to fight until all other units have done so. So you select one of those options on that unit within 12 inches if you beat their leadership with 3 dice. So there's lots of different ways of actually using that ability, but the situation does need to arise for you to actually use it. First of all, you've got to get within 12 inches. That's not an easy thing when he's moving only 5 inches. Okay, there are options to get him up the board, maybe the Veil of Darkness relic. Once you do get there, you then have to have the situation where either there's an objective secured unit on an objective, or there's a unit doing an action, or you want to half an advance and charge roll for a unit. Now that's only really going to work on units that are quite slow, because if they're moving say 12 inches anyway, they're already within 12 inches anyway, so half of the advance and charge roll is completely useless. But if it's a slower moving unit that's moving 6 inches, okay, they're going to move their 6 inches, they still need another 5 inches to get into engagement range of your Psychomancer perhaps, but that 5-inch charge now becomes a 10-inch charge. So it does kind of work sometimes, but you need to literally wait for the situation to arise. So it is luck based in some aspects. It's kind of hard to plan for it, but if you get it right, you get it right. Now the second ability that this guy has is the Nightmare Shroud Aura. So if the enemy unit is within 6 inches of this model, it's a -1 to their leadership and combat attrition tests. Now this will stack with the Harbinger of Despair ability because you need 3 dice to beat their leadership, but by this stage you're within 6 inches, you're going to get really close. So that advance and charge thing isn't going to be as useful at all in fact. So it's only now really useful for the ability to make them drop their action or lose objectives secured or maybe fight last. Again, situational. Now another thing to note about that ability, I know I'm going back to that ability again, but it's done in the morale phase, which is basically the end of your turn. Now if you fail that roll, which is 3d6, in the morale phase, then you kind of don't have any other ways of stopping them doing what they're doing. Whether it's doing the action, whether it's holding an objective for their primaries, for their next turn, you've got no other way of stopping it. Whereas if this ability happened in the movement phase, for example, at the end of the movement phase, at least you kind of know where you stand. If you fail the roll, then okay, you can move some other units into that area and try to prevent them from doing the actions or holding an objective. But the fact that it happens in the end of the morale phase kind of stinks. Another negative point on top of this is the fact that the Chronomancer can take a piece of Cryptek Arcana, which has one of these bullet points in the half advance and charge roll, but he can do it at 18 inches as opposed to 12, which is much more usable. You're going to prevent a lot more units from getting in, even with an advance and charge move. So yeah, not that many good points so far for the Psychomancer. Now let's talk about his weapons. He's got the Abysmal Lance. It's both a shooting and a melee weapon. The shoot inside of it is 18 inches, assault 3, strength 4, -3 AP and 1 damage. Quite underwhelming, you're not going to do a lot with it to be honest with you. Don't expect too much from it. And the melee side of it, which is even worse because you've only got 1 attack, but strength user, so strength 4, -3 AP, 1 damage. So the exact same stats, but this time only 1 attack as opposed to 3 shots. Absolute trash in my opinion. Don't expect anything. Now let's talk about some Cryptek Arcana available to the Psychomancer. Now one of his unique Cryptek Arcana is the Vindicator, and one enemy model within 18 inches, excluding vehicle models, you roll 3d6 against them. And if you're equal to or beat their leadership this time, so you can be equal to or beat the leadership, they're going to be suffering d3 mortal wounds. So kind of like a smite attack. Don't forget there's a -1 to leadership if you're within 6 inches as well. So it does give him an additional use, I suppose, but you do have to pay 20 points for this Vindicator Arcana. Another option here is the Dimensional Sanctum Cryptek Arcana, which will cost you 10 points, which will get him up the board because it's basically Deep Strike. So turn 2 he pops in 9 inches away from any models. That's going to be a lot better than actually trying to slog him up the board on foot or wasting a Veil of Darkness relic on this guy. It's not worth it. So if you did want to use this guy, Dimensional Sanctum is probably a good shout. And the last one of note is the Prismatic Obfuscation. I still hate saying that word, I can get my tongue all twisted. And it's where the Cryptek model cannot be targeted unless he's the closest eligible model. Sometimes that works in your favour, especially against sniper rifles and things like that. Now alternatively, you can take some Cryptothrower models. For 40 points you get 2 models there. They can not only do actions, but they're pretty good in combat. They can shoot their pistols as well. Considering it's only 40 points, they're not too bad, and they've of course got the bodyguard ability as well. And that's even if there's only 1 model remaining. Now as for a warlord trait of note, you've got Thrall of the Silent King to add 3 inches to your aura abilities, and you can actually combine this with the command protocol of Conquering Tyrant, which can also give you an additional 3 inches to your aura abilities. So in fact, your Nightmare aura can go from 6 inches right up to 12 inches with these 2 abilities stacked. And in fact that's quite beneficial because that will now match the range of the Harbinger of Despair ability as well. Now worth mentioning here, we've got the new Army of Renown, which is the Cult of the Cryptek, and the Psychomancer of course can be used for that force. Now does he add anything to that force that we already didn't have? Probably not, to be honest with you. I mean, there is a new Arcana for him I suppose, where he can select 2 of those bullet points for his Harbinger of Despair ability as opposed to 1, but that becomes even more situational. So I already didn't like it to begin with, but having 2 of them is kind of luck based for me. In fact, you've got to pay 25 points just to do that on top of that. So 65 points for the Psychomancer, 25 for the Arcana. That's a 90 point model, not doing much. If you wanted to further boost his Arcana, there is a new stratagem in the Army of Renown where you can actually select 2 Cryptek Arcanas. Again, it's a little bit underwhelming. Let's move on. So, in summary, I think this Cryptek is very situational. There are some aspects to the ability that are going to work well in certain situations, but pre-planning the game for this to actually happen is not always an easy thing. Now, half in the advance and charge roll I do find quite interesting at times. It's just the fact that it's got to be done within 12 inches, which makes it kind of awful. A lot of melee units are moving between 5 and 12 inches, and some of them can advance as well as charge in the same turn. For me, that rule just needs to be amended to 18 inches, very similar to the Chronomancer Cryptek Arcana. That way this model doesn't need to be too close in order to do it, and isn't likely going to get charged in the following turn. I'd actually genuinely argue the case for this being one of the worst units in our Necron Codex. So for today's Planet 40k rating, I'm going to go with a very underwhelming 1.5 stars.